Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. We're jumping into some Runestrike. It's time for a new season, means new cards. We're going to spend some time talking about the cards tonight. So let's jump in. Let's take a peek. So we do have our season rewards. I got to claim. New season is live, as mentioned. All right, so we're going to jump in. Actually, it's better to take a look over here. So I'll claim our initial season pack, not pass. We want to look at, where are they? Not this. Right here, actually, is what we want to look at. So this will allow us to look at all the cards, and then we'll look at what the end of season card is. And we're basically just going to go in. Oh, the end of season card is actually mine. I just realized as I'm looking at it. It's hidden Grotto. But let's take a peek at the cards that you can actually get from the packs and then just kind of give initial hot takes. Now, as you can tell, since I am just starting the season out, I don't even have any of these unlocked yet. So this is strictly from the initial glance, the initial look, initial pass. Absolutely hot take level where we could be completely wrong. But we're going to start off with Giant Fae. As you can tell from the Woodlands season, there are going to be an enormous amount of Fae. No pun intended here. But Giant Fae is an 8/10 for 10 with Vast. Appropriate. Whenever you summon a Fae, this gains +1 attack. Whenever a friendly Fae dies, this gains +1 health. Clearly supposed to be the tribal Fae. I don't want to say Lord because it doesn't confer any bonuses to other Fae. It solely absorbs other Fae, I guess. In all honesty, I kind of expect this thing to never hit the table. It is notable that you can now pull this off of Pixie Queen, and it'll come down as, what, a 10-12? Pretty sizable. But I'm not super impressed with this thing, even if you were to run all the Fae. I don't think you can reasonably expect that you are going to end up with enough in your hand to make this matter. Like, okay, he's a big dummy. That's all he is. Now, something that I'll call out later is you can slam this in, say, Laura, and then if you either give it trample or even if you don't, just give it speed with Laura A3, and this thing is very much a threat. It's very difficult for anything to take it down outside of, say, Annihilate. So, will Giant Fae see a lot of play? I would probably expect no, but it is possible. There are uses for it. There are ways to make it happen. And again, of course, you could randomly get this off Pixie Queen. But as we've seen with Demonic Overlord and a number of other conjure effects that similarly pull from, okay, give me a random X or conjure a random Y. Most of the time, I've found I don't want the high-end options. I don't want the 10 cost because it's extremely limiting for the scenarios where you could play it. And again, this guy boils down to just being a big dummy. So he punches stuff good. Do you need a punches stuff good in a dedicated Fae deck? I'm not sure. But it's possible. Anything's possible. I'm not too excited about this guy. Next up is Forest Fae. Now, this sort of correlates to my preview, which if you haven't seen it yet, you can check out rtchompgg.com. But you've probably seen it already, or you already peeked ahead in the season. We'll get there. Hey, CBG, what's good? So, Forest Fae is a 2/1 for 1 with a Warcry. Add a Grove Nymph to your hand. So, for those of you that aren't familiar, Grove Nymph is the 1/3 for 2 that gives you an extra mana each turn. Notably, it's a card that comes from outside the game, which is something that I actually really like. I love this sort of mechanic in any game, especially in digital card games, though, because it makes it easier. You know, it just creates something out of ones and zeros and hands it to you. I really like this sort of effect. Grove Nymph isn't really something that you're going to, hang your hat on and really go, oh yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. But you can go turn 1 Forest Fae into turn 2 Grove Nymph into 4-drop, hypothetically. Now, realistically, Grove Nymph has a enormous bullseye on it. Your opponent's not going to allow it to live on the board if they can help it. And the incoming patch is going to make its lifespan a lot shorter. But if it can stick, you can jump the curve, and it's very helpful. And again, it's a card without having to expend a card. So you can just continue to develop your board state. And if you're running Forest Phase, it's possible that you could cheat on playing 2-drops in your deck because you're going to have this Grove Nymph, and you go, oh, well, I'll always, air quotes, have a 2-drop because I have the Fae. Is it really going to work out that way? It's more, this is yet another aggressive Fae that you can play. So you're shoring up your early game in these aggressive builds with a body, whether it's Fae or not. You have a body that, okay, I'm okay with the size of this. It at least has higher attack than cost. 2 is not a whole hell of a lot, admittedly. But at least it puts pressure on, it lets you do something on turn 1, and it draws a card, air quotes. It's fine. Like, I can accept this as what it is. I think this is a reasonable card. That card's not very good, but out of Hidden Grotto, it's pretty good. Yeah, we haven't gotten to Hidden Grotto yet, but with Hidden Grotto, it gets a lot better. Mix it with the Matron of the Woods, and now it's better? Ah, see, now you're thinking CBG. We also haven't gotten to that one, but soon. Next up is Leathersmith. This seems a little out of place in the seasons. Now, granted, the season name is Woodlands, so I kind of get it. But there is a heavy Fae focus, so pointing at the Beast Tribe feels odd, but that's okay. Leathersmith is a 1/4 for 2. It's a rogue, and whenever a friendly beast dies, your champion gets shield equal to its mana cost. This one's weird. There aren't a whole lot of order beasts, so presumably you're going order nature in order to get, the deepest card pool of beasts if you're going to do this. Shield is interesting in that if you are playing Hyperia in this scenario, again, order nature, assuming there isn't a future hero, and then that's something to point out here. I'll call it out now, but hopefully I repeat it. My opinion for a lot of this stuff feels like there are a lot of seed cards in this season. What do I mean by that? Well, seed is a term that's typically used in card gaming to mean, well, this card came out, it feels out of place, but that's because there are going to be future cards that are going to interact with it, therefore making this one retroactively better. It's seeding for the future. And that's kind of what Leathersmith feels like. To be honest, I don't know if Leathersmith does enough. You could see where it could break a race. It could break parity on the board where your opponent and you are punching in opposite lanes. You're not really going to interact. Well, I have a Leathersmith. If you try and eliminate my guys out of combat instead of interacting with them, I'm getting shield, thereby healing effectively and increasing the life gap. Is that good enough? Probably not. I don't really like Leathersmith that much. The shield is frequently... I could see you getting somewhere between... Assuming they don't just nuke the Leathersmith, which there's something to be said for redirecting focus from your other stuff to, oh, you got to deal with my Leathersmith first. But say they kill a Bloodscent Wolf and then something else. Probably between 5 and 7 shield for 2 mana and 1 of their cards. Say they combust it and then blitz the other thing. I guess that's not bad. It just feels... This card feels as though you're not losing, but you're not winning. And there's a difference between those two, and it's a common thing in card games that if you're not losing, you're just maintaining board state or treading water, but you're never actually progressing your game plan. Now, in the sense that you're playing Hyperia, you could then be developing another threat somewhere else on the board with a 2. Possibly going to change in the future. But if you're in a traditional Hyperia build, that means that you're playing, say, Cavalry or some other speed minion like Zephyr Knight, slamming A2 on it, making it an enormous threat, and then getting in there. This requires you to play beasts, which are very awkward. I'm not a huge fan of Leathersmith, but it's an interesting effect. It's something to keep in mind. So next up is the aforementioned Matron of the Woods, and this is one that I am actually very excited about. So it's a 4-cost 2/4 Fae that whenever you summon a Fae, give another random friendly Fae +1/+1 twice. So it's notable that it's not +2/+2. I assume that there's some... I don't know if there's an existing trigger, but presumably there will be one down the line that cares that it's getting hit with the effect twice. Now, one of the questions I have for this, and I didn't get a chance to check in Discord to see if this was already asked. A, does it see itself? So when you summon this, will it give something else +1/+1 twice when you play it? That's question number 1. Question number 2, when it says another friendly Fae, does that mean another from the Fae that's being played? Or if you have Matron out and you play a Fae, can the Matron give itself +1/+1 twice? Those are both going to be very relevant things because obviously the Matron, if it comes down and it's a 4/6 for 4 with the potential for future benefit, and when I say 4/6 for 4, air quotes there because it's you have a Fae on the board, you give something +2/+2. It's kind of sort of the stat distribution. You get where I'm going with it. If it only does it afterwards, it makes it more complex. It makes it significantly more complex. I think it means you could hit 2 different Fae, assuming you have that many. That's also another way to read it. That's another way to read it, DT. I hadn't considered that because the way it was going on in my head is it's choosing a target and just doing the thing twice on that. I mean, I'm using the word target even though it may not literally target. So, for example, it can hit or should be able to hit a veiled Fae because it doesn't actually point at it. It's just doing it. Just clarifying because I use the word target and I don't want people to feel it's misrepresenting it. There's a lot of potential in this, and I'm not sure exactly how it behaves, and I'm excited to try it out. Mix it with Hidden Grotto, now it's really good. Yeah, there's a lot of potential there with Hidden Grotto for the value. That's a lot to set up, though. And again, it's also going to depend. So say you play this, and it lives a turn. Then you play the Grotto. Or even if you just had, like, you'd probably play the Grotto first and then this, because the Grotto is going to keep generating that body. But it also assumes that your opponent killed the body on the Grotto, which is not likely. So either way, it's going to depend on where and what the legal targets are for this, whether it can target itself, whether it can target other things, what it's going to be. Mix it with Hidden Grotto and it's not really good. I mean, does Hidden Grotto, is it worded as summon? What does it do? I don't remember the exact text. So it will summon it, so you will get the triggers from this. It's going to depend. This thing could be very explosive, or if it doesn't work out the way we think it will, it could be exceptionally clunky. So I am looking forward to trying it, but I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure which way it's going to go. Of all the cards in the season, this feels like the most powerful, fair one. And you'll understand what I mean as we go through them, but I really like the potential for Matron. I think that there could be something here. We talked about Laura before, so we're getting multiple nature cards. We're getting multiple myth cards. In fact, we're getting 4 myth cards. And the enchantment that you get for completing the season, which we haven't gotten to yet, is also nature. So there's a lot of things here. On top of the fact that you have the existing nature and myth options for Laura. Maybe it's her time to shine. But, like I said, I like Matron. It's just going to depend on exactly how it works. Speaking of Nether Pixie, let's talk about Nether Pixie. So, Nether Pixie is a 2/6 5 cost, and whenever a Fae you control dies, your opponent takes 2 damage. Now, I'm assuming this is going to function similar to how a number of other cards in Runestrike, namely I'm thinking of Doom Knight, work, where their triggered abilities don't go off unless they're still in play after everything resolves. Meaning that if someone's able to kill this out of hand, or they're just even in combat, it doesn't actually matter. This will not trigger itself. It's not going to see itself and deal 2 damage to your opponent, which would be really good, but based on how we see other interactions function, I don't think that's going to happen with Nether Pixie. I could be wrong. This is interesting because, as CBG pointed out, I think this is really excited about Grotto. I think this is really excited about some more aggressive Fae. Now, the problem is you are pretty limited, as far as I can recall, with Shadow Fae. Yeah, it's Blue Hag and Nether Pixie. So that means if you are Crow or Keeper, as is being suggested, you're really going to rely on Hidden Grotto and some other relatively lackluster Fae. Lucky and Veil Tracker aren't exactly lighting the world on fire. Veil Tracker's fine, but typically you want to find it from other things. So to me, honestly, I was more thinking Darlock, is that you get a lot of the aggressive Fae, the good, primarily the Fae live in Myth. So you're going to get a bunch of these. You can create a somewhat substantial board. Blue Hag is not great, but I guess maybe there's something there. And I don't think you're really reaching for the neutral ones. But point is that Nether Pixie could end up being something if there's a greater fleshing out. And I don't know how many more Fae we're going to see going forward. You know, this is the Fae season, seemingly. Are we going to get a huge quantity of Fae? We can kind of look back at the Rogue season and see how many we've gotten since then. A few. We've gotten some. But it's more likely that we're going to see Fae in the traditional locations, aka Myth, rather than in, and possibly Nature, I guess. They seem to have the next highest quantity. But we're not likely to see an enormous amount of Shadow Fae or Chaos Fae or something like that. Point is that our options are going to be exceptionally limited for where Nether Pixie can show up. I'm not super excited about this guy. I don't anticipate a whole lot happening. I expect that I will probably get beaten, and a number of people will get beaten by Hidden Grotto plus Nether Pixie, because the time that it happens, you're just not going to be able to deal with the Pixie. It is a 6 health minion. It is a 5 cost. Whoop, I just kicked and knocked my phone on the floor. I kicked the charging cable. It's in that sweet spot where you can't combust it, you can't annihilate it, and it's going to be challenging to deal 6. There are very few things that can. So it could stick on the board for a few turns and therefore push. You know, if you think of this as an 8/6 for 5, just if it was a blank text 8/6 for 5, would you play it? Possibly. But the problem is a blank 8/6 for 5 is not quite what this is, because it's requiring you to have a certain quantity of Fae in your deck for it to do anything and be that 8/6, or better, or more realistically, worse. I'm not too enthusiastic about Nether Pixie, to be honest. Basically, every time at the end of your turn, recover effect Hidden Grotto will trigger and Matron in the Woods will buff, and if your opponent kill Forest Fae, it takes 2 damage. It does set up an interesting scenario on your side if you're able to get all 3 in play. But I think what's realistically going to happen is your opponent just slaughters Nether Pixie, murders the Matron, maybe not necessarily in that order, and then maybe takes 2 or 4 extra damage. I don't think Nether Pixie's really... Again, I could be wrong, but I'm not super excited about this guy. I think because it fits that it's Shadow. It's also notably a demon, so you can get this off of those other cards. You know, the demon overlords, the nightmares of the world. Problem is that it's just not doing enough, I don't think. 2 damage is not substantial enough. While it's sturdy, you can kind of ignore it. I think most people will ignore it and just go, oh yeah, I take 2 extra damage every time I kill one of your things. Okay. There's something about Nether Pixie that feels like it's just going to be too slow or just doesn't quite do enough. But if it's good, it's probably going to feel oppressive. That's the weird thing. It's one of those cards that it's going to straddle the line and probably only be on one side or the other. It's never really going to be fair. We'll have to see. Next up is Vale Huntress. So this is not a Fae. It's an Amazon warrior. It's a 2/4 for 3 with stealth. And strike, deal 1 damage to a random enemy minion. It gains suffer 1. So the stealth is actually pretty cool. To an extent. I feel like it would obviously be better if it had evade. But stealth ensures that you can't combust this right away. The fact that it deals 2 effect, essentially, dealing the damage and the suffer 1 is important because at 1 a turn, it's not really all that much. And suffer can stack, so you could take something down pretty quickly if they only have a single threat out, let's say, and you just keep stacking this up. Realistically, I don't anticipate you're ever going to stack this up. Now, this is actually pretty relevant. This I can't wait to put in a Laura control deck. I was about to say that, DT. I was just getting there. So the deal with this one is if you can give it speed, you can just annihilate your opponent's board. Hypothetically, it is random. You're not controlling where it's going. So maybe you land on the same thing every time you don't want it to, or you want it to land on the same thing every time and it's spreading. There's only so much you can do. But it does give you a solid strike effect that actually, could have board control impact. Plus, in Laura, you can slide this around. So you push through with stealth, and then your opponent tries to get involved, or they set up in front of your stealth guy. It's like, all right, well, I'll just move it to another lane, sort of thing. There's a lot of options here. This feels solid enough that I want to try it. I definitely want to try it. The body is somewhat lacking. It definitely feels like it needs to probably kill 1.5 things to 2 things in order for you to feel that it's valuable, I think. But this could help curb a lot of the aggressive strategies that have been running around because it's probably going to 2 for 1 against those decks. You're going to be able to take something down. They can't interact with it because of the stealth for the most part. And then you're probably going to get a second thing before they can cleanly deal with it. Or you break their tempo because what are they going to do? Dimensional Rift this thing? That's going to be a really bad turn for them. I think Vale Huntress has some good potential here. But yeah, Vale Huntress seems to have a lot of potential. It's a little weird to me, just as an aside, that the Amazons don't seem to have a unifying theme. I mean, a lot of the tribes don't, I guess. The Fae are kind of all over the place. Priests are all over the place. The Amazons are all over the place. Soldiers are kind of unified by being efficient threats and then, I guess, train? I don't know. It doesn't feel... If somebody asked me, what does the Amazon tribe do in Runestrike? I couldn't really tell you because you got stuff like this. You got the ones that summon beasts. You got other ones that do other random things. I don't know. I'm just digressing, but it's kind of weird. Biggest pet peeve about this card, it's a hunter, but has random targeting. It's targeting a pack, we'll say. Everything she's hunting is operating under the School of Fish model, Luminar, so it's just, all right, we'll pick off whoever we can. I guess. I don't know. I'm reaching here. Also, she's a warrior, which a lot of Amazons double up on. Their Amazon warriors. Their Zephyr Knight is an Amazon noble, notably. But other than Brienne 3, I don't know that you care about it being a warrior all that much. I guess if you're playing Ogma, it's another warrior for Torek War Leader. You know. Here is one that I'm actually legitimately worried about. And I'll tell you why. Wandering Huldra is a 2/2 for 2. It's a spirit fae that whenever this gains health, you also gain that much health. Now, here's the thing. One, it's a legendary, so maybe my concern is unfounded. Well, that's a reason the concern may be unfounded. Second reason is, as of right now, I don't think there's really any... You're ahead of me, Luminar. Yep, that's where I'm going with it. It's a legendary, so it's difficult to rely on. Problem number one. Problem number two, I don't know that there is a way to make this busted. As in, I don't think the cards exist today. But every release from here on out, the first thing I'm going to think of, well, maybe not the first thing, but in my laundry list of things that I check is, does this suddenly become broken? Does this become broken? Does this become broken? Wandering Huldra is now on that list. Why? Because there's no cap to this. You could gain, quote unquote, infinite life. There have been combo decks in other games, notably Magic, that I have played, where the game plan was gain infinite life. Now, life gain is usually bad, like really bad. It's almost always, and I emphasize the almost because obviously I cited an example mere moments ago, but it's almost always worthless to play. You are, again, not losing instead of winning. However, when you say I gain arbitrarily large number of life, say, I don't know, 10,000, you'll win because your opponent can't kill you. They will run out of resources, especially in a game like Runestrike where, yeah, they're going to start redrawing their whole deck through the void and then die to void damage. That'll happen. Or you'll just punch them to death with your hero, your champion, because they will never actually deal enough damage. I don't know if you can do that. It's going to require a loop. It's reliant on a single legendary. So as compared to the Evangelist combos or the Sailing combos that we saw in the past, where there was redundancy both in the cards because they weren't reliant necessarily on legendaries, you also had part of the component was a blood ability, which you can't run out of other than running out of blood. And you started with it in hand every game. Point being is I don't know that the cards exist for Wandering Huldra yet. But it is absolutely something to keep in mind because it is a loopable card that gives you a payout that could technically end the game. If you go to 7 billion life, guess what? Your opponent's not killing you. You could get up and walk away, go get a sandwich, go watch a movie, just let the game run. Your opponent's going to run out of time. I guess technically you can't do that because it would time you out and you'd forfeit. But you get the idea. Wandering Huldra has potential. I'm concerned about it, but I don't know that it's going to be a thing. Next up is Flight of the Pixies, and then I'll have to take a quick break, chat. So Flight of the Pixies. I actually really like this one. So it's a 2-cost that's draw 2 random Fae from your deck, imbue 1, they cost 1 less to a minimum of 1. So I appreciate that they added to a minimum of 1. As we've seen, there's a number of problems that can come up when you have 0-cost cards. This card, I think, is definitely playable in multiple scenarios. One, it's drawing 2 cards. You know what they are. It's random Fae, but you could absolutely build your deck in a toolbox fashion where maybe there's only 2 Fae in your deck, or say 4. It doesn't really matter. Some number where you have a pretty good sense of what they are. Or it's 4, but it's 2 copies of one and 2 copies of the other. Something like that. It gives you a reason to expend excess mana later in the game or on weird turns where you might have a spare mana that you have nothing else to use on, so the imbue is relevant. And since it makes them cheaper, it makes your later turns better when you play them. And additionally, you could also just play it in Fae aggro and go, okay, well, I'm going to guarantee that instead of drawing 2 random cards out of my deck, I'm guaranteed getting 2 bodies, which is something that is very relevant for aggro decks. I really like this. I think it's a pretty solid card, and I do expect to see this one. I don't know if there's a whole lot else to say. I mean, I think a lot of the things for Flight of the Pixies really stand out to you immediately, and that these are, this is what you're going to do. These cards help round out nice builds for me. Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is really nice, and I actually, one thing I'll add for Flight of the Pixies is I hope that all of the major tribes, so Fae is clearly a major tribe, Rogues, a major tribe, Priests, I guess constructs, you can list them all out, beasts, whatever. I hope that they all get something like this, where it's get me the stuff that I'm trying to do right now and give me something cool about it. It doesn't literally have to be draw 2 random X, imbue 1, they cost 1 less. It could be, the imbue is give them a buff. It could be draw their cards. It could be restore resources. Like, beasts have this weird blood sub-theme. So, imbue 1, they all have you gain a blood when they get played for beasts or something like that. I'm just making stuff up. But it would be cool if they all had these different things to play into, well, this is what my tribe wants to do, and then really solidify, well, this is the core theme of the tribe, which I think is something that Runestrike is lacking. As I mentioned earlier, some of the tribes feel like they're all over the place. A lot of them do, where they all have the same tag, but there's no unifying theme. They just do stuff. And they're roughly in this mana range most of the time. I don't know. I don't feel that a lot of the tribes in Runestrike really are coherent with how they are portraying themselves. But digression aside. Let's see. So the next one up on our Woodlands Path of Glory World Tour is Return to the Forest. So 3-cost spell, your Fae, wherever they are, gain Berry. Your champion gains 1 health. Now, I'll be honest, I think this card is trash. I think the effect is awful. Assuming you play it on curve. Let's assume you play it on curve. You gain possibly somewhere between 10 and 15 health. Assuming that you have absolutely stuffed your deck with Fae. Okay. It matters that it's out of possibly a combination that may not have a lot of life gain. So say you're playing an aggressive Fae deck. This may not be bad, contrary to what I was just saying, if you use it to break open the race. So the idea is you're an aggressive Fae deck. You play this on curve, and then you are just 100% all in on face. You don't ever care about anything with the exception of clearing a path. And then you just rely on the fact that as your opponent naturally removes your Fae, you're going to break, they can't keep pace with you because you are going to be gaining this 1 health and it will add up over time. Even just chump blocking with your Fae means that you're gaining that life as well as preventing the damage that you would be taking. And it's possible that something could happen there because in the context of gaining 10 to 15 life over the course of a game, it's not an insignificant amount. Now, realistically, I don't think that's really going to matter. That assumes that you gave up turn 3, so you went 1 drop, 2 drops, skip turn 3 to play this, which could just break your own tempo enough that you end up losing as a result. One thing that I think really that this card does really have going for it is that it is a cool effect that it is going to add an effect to your cards in your deck, in your hand, in your void, etc. I think this is actually really cool, and I hope to see more stuff like this. And it would be dangerous if this was, even if it was just gain 2 health, or if it was, God help us, if it was deal a damage to your opponent. That would be ridiculous. But I just don't know if this is going to be impactful enough. It's something I'm going to have to try. Because as I said, if you think about it as if you were to play 10 to 15 Fae over the course of a game and they all died, because either you've killed your opponent or they died, well, I guess they could run past your Fae and kill you. So there is that option too. But if you assume they die, that could be an enormous amount of life. How many times have you played a game and someone went Nature's Blessing or Spirit Surge or something like that, and then just broke the game open because, oh my God, they just gained 15 life in 1 turn. This isn't in 1 turn, and it is requiring you to play all those cards, but you're probably playing them out anyway, so. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of Return to the Forest, but I do see a world in which it's possible for this thing to be impactful. It's something I'm going to have to try and see if I can actually squeeze it into the 24, because it feels so off theme for what you'd probably want the deck to be doing that you may not find room, but we'll see. So last one for the initial set of cards is Sacred Glyph. Now this is one that I was alluding to earlier, and we're going to talk about it now. So it's a 2-cost spell. Target friendly minion gains divine. Draw a card with mana cost equal to the blood spent. I think this is really cool, and I mentioned it with some of the other cards that you could potentially set up a toolbox-based deck where, you bank a bunch of blood, you play Sacred Glyph, you burn through all 3 of your blood abilities, so now you've drawn 3 cards, and you know exactly what those cards are. Either based on what you have in your hand, what you have in play, what you've already played, you can go find certain things. It does give you that toolbox approach also, where just in general, even if you're not burning all 3 blood abilities, you can just go, oh, well, my blood ability, it's not going to be a great play this turn, but I'm going to do it because I want to go get this card. And because this goes on an existing minion, you've already invested the mana there. Hypothetically, maybe you play it that turn. But Sacred Glyph only costs 2, so you could play it, go find the card, and then play that card. I think there's a lot of potential here. Is the toolbox approach really going to work out? Well, it's going to be tough. If you have multiple things that cost 3 when you go to do it, it's presumably just going to give you a random one, as opposed to letting you choose. On top of it, we do have a cap on blood abilities right now, where, they only go so high, so you can't tutor for your 10 drop, for example. If you mirror as well, the dragon that reduces blood cost, well, now you're getting lower cost things. You may not even be able to get something if you don't have, say, a 1 cost in your deck and you reduced your blood ability to that. There's definitely a lot of things that I like about this, and it may just be from playing so many card games that, I have all these possibilities of, oh yeah, well, that time when I played this game and then this card existed, we were able to do this crazy thing. Or this card was so busted in this build, in this format, years ago. And it kind of influences how I think about this stuff. But I think there's a lot of potential in Runestrike for this. I expect Salen and Brienne can abuse this pretty well. So Salen is important to call out because the blood ability is repeatable. So as compared to setting a toolbox approach and then saying, oh, well, I'm only going to have 1 5 cost in my deck or 2 5 costs, so I know what I'm drawing when I do that. Realistically, I guess it doesn't matter too much given the small deck size of Runestrike and other things, but it could matter where, I know I only have this one thing in the deck. I'm going to go get that every time. With Salen, you could just have a deck full of 2-drops and then start drawing 2-drops left and right. Like, you nuke their board, nuke that guy, get a 2-drop, nuke that guy, get a 2-drop, nuke that guy, get a 2-drop. It's like Oprah, but instead of giving stuff out, you're getting stuff. I guess. I don't know. That doesn't really work. But I think there's an option for this. I think this will definitely get played. I think this is definitely valuable. It's going to be interesting to see how the builds shape up with this. So last one is all the way over here, and that's Hidden Grotto. Hidden Grotto was actually my preview card. So as mentioned earlier, if you want to see my initial thoughts on it, you can check out the initial preview article at rtchompgg.com. But I really like Hidden Grotto for a number of reasons. One that I didn't call out in the article, but I was thinking about, was just using it for consume. It gives you an easy, you will have a body. Well, maybe not always. Your opponent could keep clearing it, but if they're investing a ton of effort in killing the Forest Fae, like, okay. It's not... You can probably live with that scenario or something really weird is happening in your game. Either way, I think there's a lot of things to go with Hidden Grotto. We saw a number of Fae, such as Nether Pixie and a few others that really are going to like pairing with this, but it's a legendary, so it's difficult to rely on. It probably would be a little ridiculous if it wasn't legendary, if you were able to enchant multiple slots with this. But I think there's potential with Hidden Grotto. I do think it's pretty decent. I'm actually pretty impressed with it overall. We've seen some really bad enchantments. I think of the ones that came in through the seasons, this is probably the best one so far. So, let me put it this way. Ignoring the Salen ones, this is probably the best one. Because you have what? Den of Thieves, you have Order of the Aegis, you have the Harvest one, the Morlich one. I think this is better than those, but, it is what it is. Overall thoughts on the season of what we're going into. Now, again, this is without playing any of these cards. There's the Womp Womp. Get a little Womp Womp going. Without having played any of these cards, I really liked a lot of things that were in the last season, and I'm very excited for them. I am less excited about a number of cards in this one. I think it's also what's influencing how I feel about these is that I think that the balance changes that are coming in are going to have way more impact than any of these cards, maybe all of them combined. I just don't know that these are going to have the immediate impact that changing Sakara or Brienne or even Dawn are going to have. And that's before you consider, because I'm looking at the spreadsheet real quick, any of the other changes that are going through. Now, some of the balance changes, which we're not going to go over tonight, are not super impactful, but there are some that are really going to make a big deal. That being said, I think there are definitely things in here that we're going to expect to see more of. Namely, and as chat's pointing out, I expect Matron of the Woods is one of the big winners from this. I really like Sacred Glyph. I mean, I like Flight of the Pixies and Vale Huntress, but I think they're on a different level than these two for me. Huldra is very much, I kind of wish this card didn't exist because I just don't want to think about it every time that new cards come out or new balance changes happen that like, oh, well, does this break Huldra in half? Especially because this and this exist. So you effectively have 3 copies of Huldra in that hypothetical combo deck because you will 100% be playing Sacred Glyph. And odds are you have a champion with a 2-cost blood ability. That may not actually be true. I mean, you could do it in Sailing. Dawn doesn't. Brienne doesn't. Evangelist does. There's a couple of them at the very least. So, point is, you have champions that could tutor for Huldra. But putting that aside, the other stuff just feels okay. I don't really care about Return to the Forest. Forest Fae is fine. It's really for Hidden Grotto. Leathersmith is, I don't know about that one. Giant Fae is kind of in the same bucket as Leathersmith. And Nether Pixie could be good. I mentioned this when we went over it individually, but either it's going to be not worth it, in which case I'm not saying that no one will ever win games with it. You will absolutely have games that are decided because Nether Pixie hit the board and was unaddressed, but you're likely to be better off without it. If it turns out that it's very good, it's going to feel exceptionally oppressive. Like exceptionally oppressive, because you just can't do anything about it most of the time. Like that's the scenario where you're not going to be able to beat a Pixie, is you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And that's going to be an enormous feel bad. But I guess losing it all is going to be a feel bad, right? So overall, it feels like this is a lower power level season, but that doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of diamonds in here. So there's definitely things to look forward to, but that'll do it for this particular review. So as always, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and Black Lives Matter.